Hello and welcome. This is Working Class to World Class, and in this episode I'm catching up with a little working class lad all the way from Paisley, which is just outside of Glasgow, but now he is one of the world's most famous photographers. He's even worked with some of the biggest superstars, so check this: Daniel Craig, Stormzy, Kate Moss, even Bowie. Wow. But it doesn't stop there. He's produced music videos, documentaries, even a feature film. I honestly don't think there's anything that this guy cannot do. He has got creativity running through his veins, and I cannot wait for you to hear his story. Breaking through the barriers of adversity, I'm Lynn Lester, and this is Working Class to World Class. So Rankin, this is really exciting. We are currently sitting on a yacht in Cannes in the French Riviera. Young guy from Paisley, and you're here now, so we're going to have a chat, because I think for everyone that knows you, they know you as this famous photographer, creator, innovator, and that's kind of what a lot of people focus on, is your fame, and because you're obviously extremely good. But I think what people don't know is you weren't always this guy. You were a wee boy in Paisley. So can you tell me, where were you brought up and where were you born?
I was born in Glasgow and brought up in Glasgow till I was 9 years old. So all my memories of Glasgow are pretty hazy, apart from, playing on the streets, which was a big thing, playing Kirby.
I love
Kirby. Like if you're not Scottish, you won't probably know what Kirby is, where you take the ball and you try and hit it across the road onto the curb and have it bounce back. So yeah, playing Kirby. My parents were very much a working class family, not through really birth, but more through my parents, my father's dad dying young, because he was in the war and he'd been infected by the war. So he died when my dad was 15. My dad had to leave school at 15. Super smart guy, but he had to look after his mum, so he went and got a job and took responsibility. My mum's family as well, not completely working class, but by the, through the war years became quite poor, and so I was brought up on an amazing street, very much a kind of working class street in Glasgow. My dad super smart, but I'd been working since the age of 15, and I think that really that background very much kind of set me up for my whole life, because their approach to everything was incredibly Glaswegian, in the sense that it was punchy. Nobody was put onto pedestals. Everybody was. It's like the equity in Glasgow, in terms of who you are and what you do, is very even. It doesn't matter if you're Catholic or Protestant, you're still weirdly respected. It's very strange. So I think that was quite a big, part of my upbringing.
Yeah. Well, what was the street in Paisley? Can you remember?
God, no, I can't remember. I think we moved and I went to Homehead School, was what I remember, going to Homehead School. So, which I got, the belt for talking. I don't know if you've ever had the belt.
My mum told me about the belt.
I used to get the belt like that for talking in the line. It was definitely a really interesting situation, because my parents lived on a Catholic street, but I went to a Protestant school. My dad was very much a non-sectarian. He supported Queen's Park. He wouldn't let me put Glasgow Rangers stickers in the car. So, quite interesting. And I think that my parents they really were proud of being Scottish, but he definitely had ambitions to move beyond that. Big golf, loved golf. And we moved to Yorkshire when I was 9, and we were in somewhere called Thirsk in North Yorkshire between 9 and 13, which was literally the middle of the countryside, very much a countryside, it had the market, on a Wednesdays and a Saturday, and it had the market. You still had a proper market, and which is James Herriot's town, where he wrote all creatures great and small, veterinary books. Yeah, he was our vet. He was our local vet, which is really strange, really cool guy. And then when I was 13, we moved to St Albans in Hertfordshire. So my dad progressively did better in his job, moved to London. Essentially, he used to commute, and I was brought up in this very middle class to kind of upper class town, St Albans, commuter town, quite a lot of posh people, and my accent came from being at the local comprehensive Beaumont. So that was my journey, but it was good. It was really amazing because my parents just supported me through everything. So, I had a very solid education. The reason my dad moved was because he wanted me to have the opportunities that he didn't have. And what moving did for myself, I'm not sure my sister experienced it in the same way, but I got the opportunity to reinvent myself twice. So from Glasgow to Thirsk, I could reinvent myself, and then 13 is a great year to reinvent yourself. Yeah. So when I went to St Albans, I had this really brilliant situation where I was halfway through the year, and my parents said, look, because the curriculum's so different, why don't we just take you down a year and let you do your 4th and 5th year at school clean, as opposed to halfway through, because obviously your 4th and 5th year is when you'll start studying for your GCSEs, or GCs they used to be called. So they were like, no, the curriculum's a bit different, let's take him back. And I got to restart my 4th year, and I think that opportunity to reset myself, and I went from being probably the middle of the class to being sort of nearer the top of the class, was a big shift for me, and it gave me this real feeling of confidence. And also I think the Thirsk school, there were a couple of teachers that were a bit ropey, and my parents were they loved Thirsk, and what was interesting was they actually moved back to Thirsk after my dad retired. He moved back to Yorkshire. He loved Yorkshire, and he loved Yorkshire people. He loved the kind of like the down to earthness. I think it reminded him of Glasgow, but he didn't want to go back to Glasgow. I don't know why. I never asked him. I'm really sad I didn't ask him.
Yeah, because what did they do for a living then? Because I know you were talking about the war, but what was his sort of job?
My dad was a sales manager for an oil company for Conoco. He'd been a sales rep when he was a kid, so no formal education. If you've got a gift of the gab, and if you've got that kind of charisma, which is really good talker. I loved everyone as well. My dad loved everybody. So he could talk to a king, queen, or he could talk to the bloke at the local shop, and he loved chatting. So he was really confident, and I was never as confident as him. So I was always kind of in awe of him, and I think that he became a sales rep because he was just very good with people and money and deals. He really understood all of that. So he was a sales rep. My mum worked as an accountant, and then as we moved down, she became more of a full-time mum.
Yeah, because obviously, it sounds like a really nice story, but in every working class family, there's always kind of hardships. It's never as easy as it looks. But what would you say were was there any sort of bits that were hard?
Not really. I mean, hard in the sense that we were definitely not, we were a family that didn't have a record player.
Yeah.
So, which seems bizarre when you think about it, but I mean, I didn't get a record player till I was 13. I think I got a cassette recorder. I mean, what is that? But I got a cassette recorder player. I got a cassette recorder player when I was about 11. So things like, records, jeans, for example, we didn't wear jeans until I was probably 12. I didn't have jeans.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing. So I think my family were a post-war, that I was born in '66, so, what's that? 19 years post-war.
Yeah.
My parents were quite old, were a bit older, so exactly, 30 years older than me. So my dad had a kid at 30.
Yeah.
My mum was about 31, and I think that came from not having enough money. They didn't not have a family because they didn't want a family. They didn't have enough money to have a family. So once they had a family, my dad was very much about that, that tight knit group, the four of us, and it was a real, we wouldn't. If I asked for something, I would get it, but it would take maybe a year. My dad had to like decide that, I really wanted it. So that I think being brought up in that post-war poverty gave them a sense of need and desire were very separate. What you need is a meal and clothes. What you desire, what you really want, is something you've got to earn. So I had lots of jobs when I was, at school, and I was encouraged to do that. So very, very, very much kind of like I'd never need for anything, but as I said, no jeans, no record player, but and I had to persuade him. For example, when I was about 13, I got really into the Fonz and Happy Days, and everybody at school had a Fonz jacket, and my dad said, "Not getting a Fonz jacket, it's not happening." And then I got this jacket for Christmas, and he brought me like a Del Boy leather jacket, and he said, in his Scottish way, "It's leather. The other ones are plastic. This is leather."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "But it doesn't look like I want to be the Fonz, Dad. I don't want to be Del Boy." So I think that no, I mean, we never needed for anything. So there was no deprivation, but we went from I actually went back there about sort of 20 years ago to the house that we lived in, and just seeing it, I was like, wow, this is like so far away from where we got to, or where he got to, and we were definitely living, in a essentially a council house that I think had been bought. I don't even know. I don't know if he owned it or rented it. So I don't know. I don't know what his level of poverty was, but it would definitely. And what was really interesting is that we actually were starting to do well in Glasgow, because before we moved, probably 6 months, they bought this amazing, one of those beautiful kind of Victorian houses that are, they're semi-detached, but they're really massive, which was gorgeous, with a garden, with a massive garden. And I think, I don't know if he was intending to move, but I think the opportunity maybe came and he was like, right, I'm gone. Yeah. But I don't know, so I don't know. I never asked him that question. I wish I could ask him.
See, it's funny because that generation, isn't it? There's certain things, my parents were older, and there's certain things you just don't ask people of that generation, because it doesn't feel, because you're brought up, I don't know about you, but you're kind of brought up to respect your elders, you know your place, you know what you should do. And it sounds to me as if your mum and dad protected you from any poverty they went through.
1,000%, and it even protected me from death. I did a big project on death when they died, because we were so told, don't worry about it, we've got it covered, and we don't really want to talk about it. You will be gone, you're looked after, there's money there for you, and really in a lot of ways my parents protected me from everything. And I always used to say I was so cotton-wooled, but at the same time morally given this real compass, because my dad was so about equality, and it was very proud of being Scottish, but very happy to leave Scotland. He would watch football like it was going out of fashion, and the whole, what country do you support? I mean, there was no question. He was proud, and he would make jokes about the English. He loved England, but he would make jokes about being English all the time. So I think that we were very shielded from a lot of stuff, which meant that when I actually found things like politics and creativity and stuff like that, it was much later. I remember when I was 16, I decided to be a vegetarian. My dad was like, "No, it's not happening. It's not happening. We went through a world war. You're not becoming a vegetarian." And things that was so frustrating at the time, but now you look back, it was like he was from a time where principles and he wasn't like perfect. I remember he cheated at golf once, and I was like, it devastated me that he cheated at golf, because I'd put him in this kind of such a hot bracket of high esteem, and you just don't cheat at golf. And I don't think it was a regular thing. I think it was just this one time under a lot of pressure, because I used to caddy for him, and he wasn't. He had flaws. Everybody has flaws, but all I know is we never had need for anything.
Yeah.
And he was very indulgent, where it took him time, but he was very indulgent.
And did you ever go on any like kind of cool family holidays? Obviously you said your sister.
No, we never went abroad. So I think the first time I went abroad was like a French, school trip.
Yeah.
To Paris. That was my first, which was, I had to be like 15. So if you can imagine not going on holiday, we went to a campsite, we went to a caravan. We spent most of our holidays in caravans.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, I kind of look at it and I think, God, I wish I'd been able to speak a different language, and things that are just natural to being brought up in a very kind of different way. But I don't think that I don't regret anything, because the way that they brought me up gave me incredible confidence and self-belief. And even in situations where I wasn't confident, they gave me this ability to have my own mind in them. So I just really, and also I think being brought up in Britain in the kind of 70s and 80s, that we underestimate how powerful the BBC was, how powerful, being able to watch brilliant TV shows and have that kind of community. We'll have a shared experience of stuff, and I really, I know that I learned so much from my education and going to great state schools, and going to college, state-run college, and I know that I learned so much about culture and society from that. Yeah. So, I used to watch BBC Two on a Sunday afternoon, and Open University is brilliant because you can literally just, you can just watch it and pick up these like mad things from any different, genre of education, and it would just be on. It was, there were set times, and that was how you watched it, and I think that we underestimate how incredible, what that was for us all. And it was at a time when I think education was really believed in, from the 60s onwards, and I don't regret any of that. I love all of that. So, and just my parents were just brilliant at giving me that, backing me up. Like one of my favourite stories is when I was at this school in Thirsk in Yorkshire, and it was a parent-teachers evening, and my dad went. It was my English teacher, and they're queuing up to sit down, and my dad was Scottish, so this idea of everybody being treated respectfully was very important to him. And he went into this thing and they were made to queue, and which annoyed him. And he sat down and this English teacher said, what's the name? And he's like, Waddle, Rankin. She looks like that, gives it a look and looks down. Yes, Rankin. Lacks imagination, isn't creative. And my dad said, no, can't be the same kid. And the woman's like, and you know, they're not used to people talking back to them. In a market town in Yorkshire, know your place. My dad never knew his place. Sorry, you know, I'm a teacher. I have the degree. You know, what do you mean? And my dad's like, no, you can't be the same boy because you say he lacks imagination, yet he's told me you're his favourite teacher, and he must have an incredible imagination for him to think you're his favourite teacher.
Oh, fantastic.
And then the woman says, I think we're finished here. And my dad says, I think we finished the minute we sat down. And stands up and walks out. You know, and then he comes back and tells me that story. It's not like he hides it from me. I was 12, 13, he comes back. I think I was 11 actually, because I think I just started at the school and hadn't really got my bearings. And you know, there's nothing wrong with Thirst School in Yorkshire, trust me. But at that time, teachers and working class parents, you know, there's a superiority, and I think that my dad just came back and said, watch out for that teacher, she's not got your back. And that continued right until I went to Thirsk. Sorry, that continued till I went to St Albans, and I was studying to do my A-levels, and I remember this so vividly. They were getting more and more annoyed that I wasn't wearing a suit jacket to school, because in the sixth form you had to wear a suit jacket, and they got my dad in again. So I'm the lower sixth, and they get my dad in, and they make my dad, my mum and my dad, and my mum wears a fur, you know, the whole. So we're going in for a meeting with the head of sixth form, Mr. Kelly, I think his name was, and or Mr. Jones, and my dad's like makes him open every single door for him. As he goes in, he just stands and waits for the teacher to open the door. So Glaswegian.
He was even in the playing field there.
He's doing it. He's doing every trick in the book. He's taking every advantage, and they sit down and they say Rankin will not conform to the school's, you know, uniform policy, which is to wear a suit jacket, and I'm just wearing a shirt and a tie or whatever, you know. And he's like, he'll be wearing a suit on Monday, don't worry. And then my dad said, is that it? And the guy said, well, I just want you to say if he's more disruptive, we won't let him take his exams. And my dad says, I'll pay for them. He said, are we done? He said, yeah. So he's like, and then he comes back and he says, watch out for Mr. Jones, whatever it was. And it's just funny. It's just, so that person, you know, having your kind of, your side it's just one of those things where I think that's why them passing away was such a big thing for me, because I just thought, I used to say it was like the roof of the house being blown off, because I had a roof my whole life. So, and then, you know, when I set up Dazed and Confused, he lent me money, you know, and it was a good deal. My dad got a really good deal, so he got double what he was getting as in interest, but because he was my dad, and he was like not going to do a bad deal, and we paid it to him right up until they passed away. And you know, he got, you know, and I always paid him back. Like I paid for his operation, you know, I did all the things that a kid should do for their parents, but he still had my back. And it was really funny, because actually when he invested in us in the magazine, he said, I'm not investing in the magazine, I'm investing in you, which is always it always stuck with me. But they just did that type of thing. Like my mum once said to me, when we were talking about doing a job, and I was talking about what I would be, must have been about 14, 15. And she said, choose a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And things like that just stay with you.
Yeah.
So it's just very lucky. And I think that I put a lot of what I've become down to what my parents were like. And I'm sure if you asked my sister, she would have a different view, because it is all very rose tinted. But all I know is that he did that again and again and again. And there's so many instances that I can remember where he just went, no, you don't do that, you do this, or, you know, whatever.
Do you know, it sounds really nice. I mean, I was very close to my parents as well, and, you know, both of them have passed, and it sounds to me as if, I mean, clearly you were very close to your mum and dad. What are their names, and also what happened to them?
My dad was John Roy Waddle, and my mum was Annie Edgar Waddle, or Anne Edgar Waddle, depending on. And they used to answer the answer when you say, "You've reached the home of Roy and Anne Waddle," which used to make me laugh. So I called my building Amroy because I wanted my mum to get in front of my dad, for the first time in her life. And my dad passed away. He had a heart attack, and my mum got lung cancer. Sorry. So my dad passed away from a heart attack, and my mum had lung cancer, and they were pretty, you know, they were quite young, really, relatively, 70, and I think he was 71 and she was 73, and it was, you know, it was pretty weird because, as I said, they really protected me from death. So they protected me from, you know, even at that stage of my life, I think I was 40, yeah, and they were like, you know, how can you be 40 years old and not really have thought about death in that way? So they were very, very interesting in that everything they did was about making sure we were okay.
Yeah, it must have been hard. I mean, you can tell that you still hurt to this day, which...
Yeah, I dream about my parents a lot, which is the best bit, really, of seeing them again. But, you know, also they did that thing where they went, we'll be gone and you'll be okay. So it's a very, I don't know if they say that enough to you. But yeah, we argued, and politically we were very different, and there were, you know, it's not all like a bed of roses. There were times where I remember when I decided to become a photographer, my dad wouldn't talk to me. So he said, you're throwing everything away, like on a pipe dream. And I don't think I would have had the confidence to say, I want to be a photographer, if he hadn't given me the confidence. But then when I said it, he was not happy, and I had to talk through my mum. Also, I had to go back and live with my parents again, because I was at Brighton Poly doing accountancy, and I was like, what am I doing here? Went back, picked up a camera, that was it, light bulb moment, and then I had to tell my dad, and I was like shitting myself about telling my dad, because he had, you know, I was also golden boy because I got into, you know, and I wasn't even brilliant at education, but I got my couple of A levels.
Yeah.
I knew I could get into a college, and my sister was brilliant. She did the whole, you know, she did it all properly, and but I was a bit more, I guess, I was a bit more unsettled and wasn't sure, because I knew that I wanted to do something that was special, but I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And then I picked up a camera and I went, oh my God, this is it, I've got it. I understand how to do this, because it was very technical back then, and I could understand all that technical stuff really easily, whilst also it being able to show the world how I saw things. So I think that he was just like, what are you doing? And also I think he did a stint as like a sports photographer or something, you know, and was like, it's a mugs game.
Yeah.
My dad would say it's a mugs game a lot. So he just thought, oh, it's a mugs game.
Yeah.
You know, what are you doing? It's a mugs game. So we didn't end up agreeing about it, and but I still had to live at the house. And then my dad was like, of course, well, if you're not going to college, pay for yourself. you
Yeah.
know, and then I had to get, proper jobs, which as a kind of untrained accountant, you really are kind of, I think, at the lowest rung on the ladder of employment. So I was getting jobs as a cleaner, cleaning toilets. I did things like, I'd work as a labourer, which is always really nice to do. But I got all these really weird. I got a job as a meat delivery boy, which is quite, funny now that I'm a vegetarian. And I just got jobs.
Yeah.
And lots of them. I didn't just have one job because photography was expensive. So you had to have a few jobs going, and then got into college to do accountancy. Got into college to do photography. And this is the weird thing. So in parallel, my dad's bought me a car, for my birthday, because he's still my dad.
Yeah.
And he still wants me to be happy and loves me. So getting all that support, you're still getting this weird support whilst he's pissed off with me about what I'm doing, and end up, going to do photography in Luton, which is, 20 miles from, or 15 miles from St Albans, and at a college called Barnfield, which is it's the other side of Luton, and then working as an usher in a cinema at night in St Albans, so having to do that stupid drive every day, like just to get back to be in the cinema, the Odeon cinema in St Albans as the usher, doing three hours a night, which wasn't very good for my social life. And balancing these two things, just because if you don't pay your way, you can't do it. So he was kind of testing me, really. And then came to my end of year show in Barnfield and stood by my work the whole night. And at the end of it went, you are either going to be incredibly successful or fail miserably. So I'm going to bet on you being successful. And that was it. And then from there on in, he was probably my biggest fan. And my mum in tandem, they all everything was in parallel. So, yeah.
It sounds great. They're just so Glasgow, the way they sort of tell it straight.
Oh yeah, no, you get told it straight. There was no, you didn't get any of that.
Oh, no.
You were told tough love but love.
Yes.
And also I think even, the family members that I engaged with, which were my aunt and my uncle, and there was always this sense of I got away with a lot, because I was a bit cheeky, had a twinkle in my eye. That whole thing, they love that. That's a Scottish trait. It's like the cheeky one. I mean, cheeky is the word that I would use for myself even now. It's like, we cheeky bugger, you get that all the time.
Yeah.
It's cheeky, that one, yeah. And they love it. They love that. They love it. They encourage the disrespect. They encourage the, you have to respect with the disrespect, the talking back. As long as you're funny.
Yes.
If you're not funny, don't talk back.
No.
But if you're funny, so I think I was just very encouraged by everyone to have my own mind. And then of course it backfired on my dad a bit, but he never said no. He was just like, well, then I think you're taking a risk. And he was annoyed with me,
You can imagine. I mean, it's funny. It's as I say, they just sound like my parents. They tell it the way it is, and if you don't like it, then just tough. And
it's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's lovely.
It's endearing.
It's lovely, and it's even. I went back to Glasgow probably like 5 years ago to go and see my kids' end of year show, and I got in a taxi from the airport, and the driver and I had one of those conversations where it was pretty much his life story, from the 45 minutes or whatever it was to the college was just his story, and it was just that brilliance of, you know, and I still do that. I still kind of ask those questions in taxis, or I really enjoy that, where people, if you get the right person, in Glasgow, it's like you just get it. It's a bit like Liverpool and Manchester as well, that you get the same sort of thing. And I always really enjoy it. And I think there's an equality thing that's inbuilt. It's a really strange inbuilt thing. And of course there's prejudice, and of course that, you know, being a sectarian city, or as it was then, you know, it was different to anywhere else in Britain. But I don't know if that was what made it like that. I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that was what it was like.
Yeah, no, you can't beat it. And you know, you were saying earlier, your dad and your mum and dad, but maybe more so your dad, really encouraged you and helped you build confidence. But you said even when you didn't have confidence.
Yeah.
So why? Can you explain that?
Being shy. I think I was quite shy, and I think I was lazy shy as well, which was like I didn't want to make the effort to. I think maybe I was liked by certain people, so my family were very encouraging. So people that didn't like me, I mean, I was also very short, so, and I wasn't very tough, so I think that I kind of learned how to talk my way out of situations, and I think that being originally Glaswegian really helped with that. But I think that I was always kind of, you know, I was never part of a cool crew at school. I was never part of the cool gang.
Me neither.
You know, and I don't know why. I never really, I kind of wanted it but didn't want it. So it was, and I think that I was shy. I don't think I was not confident. I just think I was shy.
Just shy.
And I think that, and I think the two things are different. And I think that, you know, for example, I loved performing, but I would hate to have my own voice. And now I would probably be more shy to perform than I would to get up and talk about, you know, photography or something. So I think that the you know, I definitely was good at writing and reading. I started reading when I was 3, you know, like I was very, very into books when I was a kid, and still am. And I think that kind of really meant that I could go and I can easily escape into a world. I'm very happy in my own company. Yeah. I can spend 5 days on my own, no problem at all. I don't have that need to be part of a community or a group or connected every moment of the day.
So when you were at school, you were saying like you weren't one of the cool kids, and
Definitely not.
But were you popular? Did you have friends? Did you have any bother?
No, I didn't. I mean, I got a bit bullied, a little bit bullied, but not, you know, nothing to write home about. By, I think some of the more sort of stupider big blokes, you know, because I was cocky. You know, there was a confidence to me that you can tell the way someone walks. You know, that whole. I didn't hold myself diminutively. Like I'm not like I'm a. You know, I'm very confident in my physicality. So I think that, and I was quite good at football. So good, you know, not a bad runner, like all that stuff. Wasn't brilliant at it, but it wasn't bad at it. So, you know, was on a lot of the school teams. I think maybe I just wasn't drawn to that. I never really liked that group thing. Like, I was actually on the way here to Cannes, I was looking at all these, you know, bachelor things going on, and like hundreds of men in groups of 10 going on stag do's at Luton Airport, and just kind of looking at them and watching it, it's like I've always thought it was funny. Like, to be part of it was something that I would have liked to have been, but never ever felt comfortable within it. So, and I think that kind of goes for me right through my my career. I never was in a clique at school. I was friends with lots of different types of people. I was always very much kind of, if someone wasn't particularly liked, like if somebody was effeminate, I'd always be drawn to those people and not wanting to feel bad, wanting them to be friends. I wasn't very good at being like, I didn't really stay in touch with people because we moved and then ended up somewhere. I don't think that gave retention of friendship. Wasn't good, it wasn't healthy for it, but at the same time I never became part of a little clique or a group. So as I said, played for football team, remember being on buses going to play other teams and being told to watch the rugby players because of kangaroo court and all that sort of stuff, and just thinking I don't really understand this masculinity thing that it's about, groups. And so when we were going through Luton Airport, I was going, I think it's great they're having a laugh and brilliant, but I would under probably no circumstances want to be there. So I think that's maybe made me quite singular, I haven't got millions and millions of friends. I've never wanted to be friends with famous people ever. And I think in the industry that I've kind of worked in, the media, fashion, culture, magazines, I've always been and felt like I've been at the periphery and not part of it. So, when I used to go to fashion shows in the early noughties, when we were becoming cool as a magazine, I just never felt part of it. I always felt like, who are all these people and what? And I'm still shy and not quite as confident maybe in those kind of situations as others. But as I said, it's always been a weird sort of double thing for me. It's definitely this kind of really being confident of my own opinion, but not necessarily being brave enough to be part of it, and also feeling weird in big groups. I really, really don't like gangs, and I think I might have had there was a gang of us that used to hang out in Yorkshire just before I left, and that was the first time I felt part of a group, and then I left. And it was and that was probably my only experience of it. Actually, in thinking about it, I've not thought about that for 40 years, so quite weird. Anyway.
See, the thing is, so obviously it sounds as if, you had a good childhood. Your family and your parents were amazing by the sounds of it, and then you pick up this camera. So who teaches you to use this camera actually?
Pretty much taught myself. So my mate at the time gave me the basics, and then I bought 2 books successively. I bought Basic Photography by Langford, read it, cover to cover, took it all in, loved it, and then bought Advanced Photography by Langford, read it cover to cover, and that was it. I knew technically, any camera that I use, I find it pretty easy to understand them fairly quickly, and the technicalities of it never have ever worried me ever. So, and then got really obsessed by light for about sort of 10 years, where it's now just part of my DNA. It's just it's part. I don't even have to think about it. I can look at, especially when you're framing something very quickly, I can work out what I'm doing super quickly. So it's just in your sort of subconscious now.
See, it just makes me laugh because I'm just sort of think of the typical, Glasgow hustler. You've got all these people that have studied for years. They go to all these colleges and they've got the qualifications. You get a little guy from Paisley, picks up a camera, buys books, gets self-taught. So then how come you landed the sort of big time with all the famous people?
I don't know. Obviously I did go to college and I did study for 6 years and definitely hustled at college, really hustled at college. Loved the student union, loved everything to do with, that part of being at college. I think the student union is responsible for so many entrepreneurs in our
Yeah.
British culture. Like a lot of them, like I'm pretty sure Richard Branson was a student union. Like you get in, you don't do it for the politics, you do it for
Yeah.
the parties. So, you know, I got really into magazines at college because the first day that I went to the London College of Printing, they handed me a magazine at the door, and this beautiful girl said, "Here's the college magazine," and I went, you know, great, Succession, great name. Started looking at it. I said, "Oh, who did this?" And she said, "We did. I did." And she was the editor. And then she was really cool, quite political student, but you know, and she was like, "I've hooked another one,"
Yeah.
you know. But I just, well, the politics weren't as interesting to me, and also student politics is like very, very humdrum. Like
Yeah.
it's very fragmented, and it's like lots of factions kind of fighting about the same thing. So actually, if anything, put me off politics. But because I got that magazine, I ended up making magazines.
Yeah.
So I was studying photography, but going into the student union and doing student magazines every day, and the education of the two
Yeah.
things ran in parallel. And so when it came to what am I going to do after college, I want to be a photographer, but I want to make a magazine. Because
Yeah.
making a magazine was like, back then, it's not even like making a website now. It's like, it was so other, you know, you had to be very rich. And we just happened to, you know, to own newspapers and magazines, you had to be stupid or rich, right? So, because it was such a drain
Yeah.
on capital, and very hard to make it work, and etc. etc. So I think that we were just very lucky that we came to college at the advent of desktop publishing. Apple had just brought out the Plus. PageMaker could be done on a little Apple, and they had a little Apple computer in the student union. So here you go. This is how it works. Look, teach yourself PageMaker, learn how to design. Terrible designer, but you know, self-taught on PageMaker, and then you know, you've got a little bit of a budget, and you've got an audience, and suddenly you're making, you know, one magazine every month, and you just learn. So I think what happened was I saw opportunity, and still see opportunity, where other people may not. So you know, when I remember I was basically the campaigns officer in my first year within the student union. So you get paid a wage to work for the student union. The guy who had been my kind of mentor, who was only a year older than me, Tony Savas, he wanted to be communications officer, so I couldn't go for communications officer, I had to go for campaigns officer, because he was like, I'm communications officer, I'm going to be the editor of the magazine. You know, he was an SWP, like full-on Socialist Workers Party guy. So, you know, you go into that and you're like, well, okay, I'll do campaigns then, which means you're doing posters essentially about the poll tax or whatever. And those learnings, when I came back to do communications officer, which was, so I did my first year, then did campaigns, then did my second year, then did communications officer. I was like, you know, magazines are what I want to do, and I think that I just hustled and got those skills from doing it. I remember so clearly going, putting adverts on all of the colleges saying we're looking for writers for the student magazine. No one turned up. One guy turned up, Jefferson, and that's what I mean, opportunities. So opportunities to have a budget, opportunities to have the tools and the equipment, If you've gone to the college and said, I want to learn PageMaker, oh no, you're not on the design class. You know, you've got to, but it's sitting there in the student union. There's an Apple Mac, and then they bought another Apple Mac, and then they bought another Apple Mac. And I think that's basically why we ended up doing magazines, which is why I had an advantage. And that's why, you know, if you create, back then anyway, if you created a magazine, you could give it to someone and say, do you want to be on the cover? Do you want to be featured? Do you want? And it's just this. It just you almost create your own community and network.
Yeah.
And that begets a network. So if you imagine, we probably printed 2,000, maybe 5,000 copies of our original poster. We were giving it away on Old Compton Street. You know, we were like, how do we get this out to people? Oh, let's go to Old Compton Street and give it out, right? And that 5,000 copies, we could never afford more than 2,000 to 5,000 at the beginning. That became like 2 million, you know, by the end of sort of 2005, 2006, every month. So it's kind of crazy when you think of it like that. Like, but the answer to your original question was, that was my access to people, and my first celebrity shoot was Bjork. You know, I did Gilbert and George at college as a college for the college magazine. So they were my first famous people. And the reason I got them was because a photographer called Alistair Thane said to me, they're in the yellow pages under artists. And I was like, you're kidding. He said, just call them up. So, you know, that access to these people really started with Bjork. And from Bjork, you know, Kylie Minogue, you know, it was just literally, you know, it took time. It didn't happen overnight. But by kind of 94, we were starting to gain traction and get recognition. And we were just two kids. Like, Jefferson's, you know, from Ramsgate, and, you know, his parents are not dissimilar to mine. I think maybe not quite as working class. I think more middle class. But you know, he was very much an outsider. Nobody really. I mean, he had an uncle who's a writer, but not that kind of tradition. There's no tradition. So we both were very much these outsiders who did, you know, this thing which was, we literally sat there and then, we want to create a community, and we think that it's out there, and we think that people will be interested. And I think the thing that I really have kept from that is, make it for yourself, but know it's for everybody else. Make it for you to give it to other people, as opposed to make it for them. You know, because you can't make it for them. You have to make it for you, and the audience hopefully will be interested. And I think that I'm really proud of that magazine, Dazed and Confused. It became a massive group of different publications, and such an incredible reach and such an incredible audience, and you know, it's still going. And I mean, literally back then, I think we thought we might last a year or two and move on, get jobs or whatever. And of course, neither of us work a day in our life, because we do what we love. So I think that I'm just I do think that luck has had a lot to do with it, but opportunity is luck a lot of the time, I think. And I believe in jumping into the opportunity, not sort of, like, I never understand people that say, I'm going to do this. I don't get it. I'm like, don't say you're going to do it, just do it. Unless you've done it. Like, I've been wanting to do sculptures for 2 years, and I had to have a sculpture in my hands. It's a bit bigger than in my hands, but, you know, I had to have one to be able to say, I'm doing sculptures. You know, and of course, I'm going to be doing more sculptures, but if I hadn't had one, I wouldn't be talking about it, because to me, talking about it's the worst way of dampening
Yeah.
it. You know, if you just chat and chat and chat, and I'm not saying you shouldn't think about things you're going to do, but if you're constantly telling people what you're going to do, you don't do it. So,
No.
and that's, you know, it's made me do some rubbish work, and it's made me do some amazing work.
I mean, do you know, you've just sort of epitomised everything that your parents have said to you. So your mum said, get a job and you'll never work a day in your life. Tick, you done it.
Yeah.
You hustled because you just brass necked it and asked Bjork,
Yeah.
reached out. If you don't ask, you don't get mentality. And I guess the thing is, you know, when you did get these people, did you ever think, and even today?
No, you're absolutely right, because
Yeah.
our saying has always been making up as we go along, and you know we have, but I think we've always learned from our mistakes.
Yeah. And do you ever, like, you know, when you work with these famous people, so like, let's, you know, for clarity, the Queen, Madonna, Kylie, Bowie, I mean, literally the A-list goes on. Do you ever sit there and, at any point and think, I'm from Paisley and I am here with these super famous, rich people?
Not really, no, because I mean I remember there was a moment in about 96, maybe 95, 96, where I think I'd done 8 covers or something, you know, that I'd done, you know, and it was like, and I know that I was really proud of, and I remember putting them, maybe it was 94, and I put them out, you know, and I was like, I felt like, oh wow, you're really achieving something. But you know what you really learn from any success is it's transient, it's momentary.
Yeah.
And especially photography, you're dealing with time. It's like on your shoulder time, because you shoot at a fraction of a second. Your film is a certain period of time. You know, whatever you're making, it's time relevant. And also doing a magazine, it's, you know, fish and chip paper, and it's not literally fish and chip paper, but that mentality of it being just momentary is always there. And as a photographer, that sits there.
Yeah.
Because what you want is your photographs or your work to last forever, but it's a fraction of a second. So I think that you never take it for granted, and by not taking it for granted, it means you never sort of rest on your laurels. So for me, there's never resting on my laurels. There's never not being inquisitive. There's never kind of not asking questions. And it's not that I'm not proud of what I've done. I'm like really proud of all of the images, and the magazines and everything that I feel like I've achieved. But I just don't take it for granted. So I pinch myself to go, wow, you're very lucky. One of my mates actually said to me, never forget to pinch yourself and remind yourself. And actually, a lot of the stuff maybe I would do with charity or I would do with NGOs is about reminding myself, and it's incredibly selfish to be selfless, because when you go into a situation where people don't have the kind of advantages you have, you're just getting a slap in the face to remind you you're just that kid from a working class family in Glasgow, and you shouldn't take it for granted. And I think that like being on a yacht in Cannes is a very funny experience, because I would probably be the last person in the world to buy a yacht. Not because I wouldn't like a yacht, I just wouldn't see the point of it. And my wife's not big on sailing, and I personally like being on them. But there's just more you can do with your money. You know, I would rather create a gallery or make a movie, or, you know, I'd rather be putting my investment into culture than putting my investment into me swanning it around in the south of France. And like, no disrespect to anyone that does that, it's just not me.
No.
It's just not my thing.
And it just reminds me that you are through and through Glaswegian. It's our attitude. And, you know, as we sort of wrap up here, you know, your mum and dad, and you talk a little bit about your sister. I mean, they must be, and I know your parents have passed now, but super proud of everything you've achieved.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I really, really kind of, I'm sad about, that I didn't get to show them exactly, you know, like when they passed away, I think I was still on the ascent.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of the things I was doing, it was starting to become, you know, exciting.
Yeah.
So they passed away in 2005 to 6, and you know, 2006 to 16 was just me just
Yeah.
on a just rising and rising and rising, and you know, I never got to take my yacht. You know, like that would have been fun to just let them see how the other half live, and in their head it would be how the other half lives.
Yeah.
So, you know, my parents used to call everybody they. You know, people that worked in advertising or marketing or film or TV, they do that, and I became them, and it's
Yeah.
just funny because I used to so distinctly think, who are they? Who are these they people? You know. Well, they did. That's a great ad, isn't it? They did a great job. Like my mum, that's a great ad. They did a great job. Like, and you're like, who are they? Who are these they? And I guess that's the weird thing. It's like smashing through
Yeah.
the they, you know. And it's there. There's no question. You know, I get asked favours by people all the time to help their kids or whatever. And I'm always really happy to, but I also try and balance it up by
Yeah.
trying to make us a bit more accessible.
So so this will be my final question, right? So what for you, when you look at how you were brought up, what values made you super
Ooh.
successful?
Authenticity, integrity, honesty, humility. Humility's a big one.
Yeah.
And which is kind of down to being down to earth, but it's a little bit different. Being down to earth and directness, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you know what? I can see all those traits in you. I mean, since we've met, you are probably one of the most approachable people, the way you give people your time. And I do fundamentally believe, and you know yourself, that's because of where you came from, the way your parents brought you up. And I think you're amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I just like people.
You do.
That's the thing. There's no trick. If you just like people,
Yeah.
you enjoy it. And I think that does come from my dad, being in that passenger seat with my dad when he would just talk to everybody.
Yeah.
And me thinking, God, that's so cool.
That is cool. Well, the final thought before I let you go, what advice would you give to someone who's maybe from Paisley and they want to do something with their life? Is there any just sort of words of wisdom you might impart on them?
My piece of advice is always the same, and it just is from my parents, which is do what you love. Find something you love. If you can't find that, that's the hardest thing, because
Yeah.
if you do, you'll always be happy.
Yeah.
You know, because you know it is obviously what we do is work, but it's also really good fun because I love it, and I think that's the main thing. So if you and you know, that might seem a little trite to certain people listening or watching, but also, even if you're not the photographer, the world of photography offers so much.
Yeah.
So even if I hadn't been a photographer, I would have definitely been in that world. I'd have been a gallery owner, or I would have been, you know, trying to lift people up.
Yeah.
And give them equity and give them, you know, paying it forward and all of those things, because I really believe that, you know, community, especially the creative community, there's a lot of infighting when we're not the people we should be fighting.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that are not supportive of the. So I really believe in. I know that I'd have had a job somewhere in that, you know, helping other people achieve
Yeah.
their dreams, and it would have just been as much fun.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. This has been tons of fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.